Hello, everyone. Welcome to another amazing episode of Inspired Action, where we dive into the most pressing leadership challenges and hope to inspire you to take a more coach-centered and people-focused approach to leadership. I'm your host, Kyle Pertuis, and it's time to get started with our three amazing guests for today. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Inspired Action. I'm your host, Kyle Pertuis, and I'm here with three more amazing guests today to answer this question. How do you build buy-in with team members on a decision you yourself do not fully agree with? Really looking forward to this insight and answers. But first, let's do a quick intro. First of all, we have Jazmine Horne, hailing from Atlanta, Georgia, with over 14 years of experience in senior human resource business partner leadership, and most recently building and scaling best-in-class emerging talent programs. Jazmine is passionate about the employee experience and has led numerous complex change initiatives, integrated mergers and acquisitions, and built performance-driven cultures across manufacturing, R&D, and many other corporate environments. Welcome, Jazmine.
Thank you.
We have Tracey Trottenberg-Kansas, and I'm just going to say somewhere between Marina Del Rey and Schroon Lake, New York. Does that cover it, Tracey? Pretty good.
Yes,
Tracey,
you covered the range.
Yeah, she is a seasoned mentor, master trainer, award-winning speaker that specializes in integrated feminine leadership, conscious communication, and spiritual embodiment. With over 30 years spanning both corporate and entrepreneurial worlds, she holds the holders and helps individuals integrate their authentic selves to step into their highest leadership and connect with their deepest purpose. And last but not least, Mark Cunningham out in Salt Lake City, Utah. Mark serves as the VP of Communications at the Libertas Network, where he oversees communication efforts for various projects and brands, including Libertas Institute policy work, the Children's Entrepreneur Market, community programs, and much more. Throughout Mark's career, he's led comprehensive marketing efforts to educate the public on important policy issues, served as a main point of contact for news and print media, as well as direct short and long-term communication strategies. Welcome to all of you. And Jazmine, we are going to start with you. You drew the short stick today, so you're going to kick us off with your insight on this question. How do you build buy-in with team members on a decision that you yourself did not fully agree with?
Yeah, so when I think of this question, and thank you, Kyle, for having me on this platform. It's a pleasure, and I'm also very delighted to be on this platform today with both Mark and Tracey. Your experience is very impressive to me, and I hope to be that one day as I'm emerging to leadership. But in my 14 years of experience, I know, like my mother would also say, if you keep living, you're going to experience this. So when I think of your question, how do you build buy-in with team members on a decision that you don't fully agree with? If you keep leading long enough, you'll eventually face this instance. And so I'm happy to share my thoughts on that. You know, the decision may be on the table where it's not necessarily your decision, but it's going to be your responsibility to rally the team around and align with that decision. That's going to be your responsibility as a leader. So I think of two things that really come to mind. Proactive intent, that's getting ready, being ready before it happens. And as a leader, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing preparation with your team, modeling that behavior, whether it's how do you compose yourself when changes happen? How do you adapt? Because the only thing constant is change, right? And then do you create that psychological safety for your team to even speak up when they feel uncomfortable about something? So if you're being proactive in those things, you're already setting yourself up for success when you are trying to build buy-in for a decision that's not necessarily yours. Consistency does create that credibility. And if your team has credibility, believes in you, then they will, get on board with that activity. And so the second thing I'd like to talk about, what is that activity? That's a realignment activity. So you have to get your team on board, and then you have to share the why, share the what if scenarios if you have any, and co-create a plan with your team and empower your team to really align themselves with the purpose. That's going to really build buy-in if they feel like they have a purpose in the plan, and it moves the team kind of from overreacting and having a reaction to having a readiness plan. And so that's what I really thought of when I got this question. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that last piece, especially, right? Because it's not so much that leadership is about being right. It's about being
Mhm.
aligned. Right. And
Right.
when those
Exactly.
things happen, you've got to pull that together. I love it. Let's jump over to Tracey. Tracey, same question to you. What would you add to Jazmine on how do you build buy-in with team members on a decision you yourself didn't fully agree with?
Well, I love the question too, and I love what you shared, Jazmine. I'm going to springboard off that. And I too am thrilled to be here with Jazmine, Mark, you, Kyle here. It's really fun and exciting. So, this question for me has so much to do with context,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps more than content. So, from a leadership perspective, I feel that the question is it about perspective? Like, what's the perspective that you're holding versus or vis-a-vis a position? And I feel like in order to really create alignment, I love, Jazmine, that you said psychological safety, because I believe that that is essential. And I'll say more about that in a second. But as a leader, to know, are you standing here in the face of this conversation, these challenges, these conversations from a place of positionality, or really holding a perspective that can lift everyone up towards a higher truth or a higher way that, alignment gets created? And I know that alongside that, what is required in leadership is to be able to hold safe space for that. So to be able to hold space for the conversation in such a way where different perspectives can come up, perhaps different emotions, whereas a leader, you can hold yourself and make it safe. And once that gets expressed, then lift it back up to not just the vision, because it's always about the vision and mission, but like, what is the perspective that we're holding rather than a position that we're taking? And then how do we move forward and create coherence from that place and be able to move and grow and do what needs to be done from there?
I love the simplicity of that and really taking perspective and position. There's so many applications
Yeah.
for that, right? Even, I mean, I said, it's not about being right, but that's what you're essentially saying. And from a position standpoint, well, this isn't wrong, but we got to do it because they said so, as opposed to, okay, let's shift that perspective and say, how do we move this forward and trust that it's going to be the right direction? Yeah. Good
And
stuff. Mark, let's hear what you would add to this. How do you build buy-in with team members on a decision you did not fully agree with? I know this has never happened to you.
Yeah, never. Well, the problem is that I'm not as smart as the two women who went before me, so I'm not going to try to even go over their answer, but I'm going to kind of go from a different angle of what you do before that decision is made. I think the key is having the initial conversation with the decision maker yourself. I mean, whether or not, you agree with the decision, that's not the point, but if you feel like you're heard and respected, that's going to actually give you more buy-in for that decision. If you're like, I would not have done it this way, but now I understand why you wanted to do this. And I feel like it's hard to make somebody else buy in when you don't buy in yourself. Again, you don't have to agree to buy in, but you can say, okay, you heard me, we're there. But then once that decision is made, I think you have to get rid of the biases. You can't want to say, oh, I told you so. See, this didn't work. Because if you have that opinion, your attitude is going to make sure it doesn't work at all. The same way we talk about, of course, we all have, I think, probably different political preferences, but when you have a president in there, you want them to be successful no matter if you voted for them, what party they're from, it doesn't matter. So once they're there, instead of saying, oh, I told you so, this person is so awful and all these things, and saying, okay, I want at least a fresh mind to go into this and say, I'm going to come from a completely unbiased perspective. If it's still horrible or that person's still bad, I'm willing to say it. But I think you need to say, if you're not bought in, no one else can be bought in. And then, you can be really honest too. I think the honesty piece is good. You don't want to undermine the person who made the decision, but you can tell people, look, this is something we have to do. I talk to them, I understand their vision on this. It might not be exactly what I would have done, but it doesn't really matter. So let's figure out what's the best way to make this work. And then, have people be a part of the details. You have the overarching thing. Doesn't mean that every step is planned out for you. You can say, well, why don't we try this way or this way? And it still goes down to the overarching vision of what the decision maker had.
Yeah, I love that. And I think some of what you were talking about at the beginning, I liked what Jazmine said. She called it proactive intention, right? And so the proactive intention, to speak to what you said, Mark, to really establish that type of open communication up front before things could potentially happen, can change the way we approach anything, right? I had a guy once tell me, and I'll wrap us up with this one, but he once said, if you can't champion the decision, you better make sure you model the maturity to move it forward. right? And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said within that. All right. So how would you balance transparency with loyalty if your team is sensing some type of hesitation? And we can go in reverse order, or we can let whoever wants to tackle that question first jump in. Good, Mark?
Yep, I can make it up as I go. No,
Yeah,
so
make it up as you go.
Yeah.
That's right.
no, no, I mean, I think when you talk about this, I think it's about what you put in before that. And if you're, you have to be candid with the people that work for you who work on this project. Of course, there's always a balance between transparency and loyalty. But I think that you can there's always a fine line to do where you can be honest with them and say that without letting them know everything. But the key is, we all are in this together. We are trying to win and kind of saying, we want this to be successful no matter what it is. So let me tell you this is how I feel, and I want to be as transparent as possible with you, but also understand this is what is decided. We're not talking about going back and forth in this now. We want to really go, full steam ahead. But, I think we should be measuring things along the way. If something's not working, we need to bring this to the person who made the decision, to leadership. It doesn't, like I said, doesn't have to be, oh, we're doing it this way. That's all there is to it. Any good organization will function where you're testing things. You don't just say, oh, we're going to do this, and then 9 months later, it's done. Did it work or not? You're testing things along the way. You're seeing how things are working. So I think having that communication, and kind of what Tracey said too, is, I mean, if you really have a safe space to talk about these things, people will feel comfortable saying, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? Or, how do we make this better? So I ultimately think honesty is probably the most important thing. And if you don't have, a boss or whoever, a decision maker who's willing to let you be, at least somewhat candid with your team, it might not be a great place to work. I think that, you have to have that same buy-in from your CEO to say, yeah, I know you don't completely agree with this. So you can be honest, don't trash it and say, oh, this is the worst idea I've ever heard. But you can say, hey, I do have some concerns, but we want to make this work as good as possible. And we want to make sure that, this is something we're representing the company well when we do this.
Yeah. That kind of leads back to what she said, right? What Tracey said around having that expectation, and even the psychological safety piece is, if you have that established early and often in the culture of the organization, that there's an expectation that that's the kind of thing that's going to come up, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Tracey, what would you add? Or Jazmine, either one.
Do you want to go ahead?
It
Go ahead,
doesn't matter. I'll go. So I can kind of, piggyback off of what Mark said. And I think that honesty was one of the things that I would say. Honesty is what you do. You're honest with transparency and loyalty. That's how you balance the two when the group is hesitant. But how you are honest and how you portray that really matters. And so I think as a leader, especially with HR and change and decisions that are made, responding with empathy is really where it's at. And if you can pull a story in, that contributes to a time when you felt that way that the team feels, it really calms things down, and it really helps them understand, my leader is, loyal to the team to a sense, but we also know that there's a business that we have to move forward with, and there's an alignment that we have to have to reach the common goal. So be transparent as possible, but respond with empathy.
Yeah. And we've all worked for people who ride the fence, right? They're just trying to keep the peace on either side, and you don't ever get to really what's going on or what their position is, right? If there's a
Right.
position as opposed to a perspective. And with that, I'll jump over to Tracey. How would you close this out?
I love what both Mark and Jazmine shared. And I feel like it sort of circles back to this, like who you're being as a leader, and what you're really about as a leader. And that's where the context for me is so important. If the context is being a cohesive team, or at least creating, again, a safe space where disagreement can happen or disappointment can happen and the conversations can move, and there's the trust of, and we're all in this together, like we have a higher context that we're playing with, and we can have the conversations, and making it safe to have those kinds of conversations. And as the leader, you're going back and forth. So I'd say that happens on both sides, representing the team, like when with the team, representing the higher leadership, and with higher leadership. And still representing and holding the team. So I think it's
Yeah.
a capacity to hold the layers of the conversation. And I
Yeah.
agree,
Well,
empathy, compassion, and still trusting and, showing up forthcoming.
yeah, fully taking responsibility for the one thing you have control over, and that's how you show up as a leader, right?
Yeah.
Because all of those things are great: honesty, compassion, empathy, integrity, all the things that we can throw buzzwords and put words on a wall and call them values. But how you show up is what people see and what they remember, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, you guys, good stuff. I know we could probably talk for another hour, but that's all the time we have for today's Inspired Action. Thank y'all so much. Be sure to join us on LinkedIn every Thursday at noon Central and anytime right here on our YouTube channel at MindFit Coaching. Thanks again, you guys, for joining me.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for another edition of Inspired Action, the Leadership Forecast. We're so grateful for our guests today and the impact they're making with the work they do. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel to watch the longer version of this episode, and be sure to like, comment, connect with, and follow me and each of our guests. You'll find all of our links in the caption of this video. Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in every Thursday at noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern for new episodes.